All right, we're going to get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Duke Career Conversation, a virtual career and professional development series designed to highlight the experiences, achievements, and insights of our Forever Duke alumni. Launched by the Duke New York Board in 2020 and later expanded to Duke DC, this program helps support our Duke alumni along with any Duke community members looking for professional growth and inspiration. My name is Bates Crawford. I'm Trinity class of 2022, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's featured guest, Laura Heilenday, Trinity class of 2006 and Fuqua class of 2012. Laura is currently Associate Vice President and Chief Engagement Officer of Duke Alumni Engagement and Development. Laura, it's such a treat to see you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me and thanks for moderating, Bates. Oh, the lights went out too, so we got the mood lighting on.
I love it, as it should be. All right, well, since we only have so much time, Laura, I'm going to get us started here on a commonly asked but important question. Why did you choose Duke?
So for undergrad, I really wanted to go to a school that I felt was academically rigorous. And if you were at the New York Centennial event, you heard me say this last year, is on the changing landscape of sport. But my father really wanted me to also go to a school that had really great D1 revenue generating sports. And so that's actually a pretty small list. And Duke was at the top of it. And I visited and I just fell in love when I stepped on campus. For Fuqua, I ended up choosing that because I really wanted to go into consumer goods brand management. And Fuqua has a great program and a great track record for that particular industry and function. And my husband was already a student at Duke Law at that point. So I only applied to Fuqua.
I love it. Fantastic. Looking back on both undergrad and your Fuqua experience, do you have any favorite Duke experiences or memories that have had a lasting impact on your trajectory?
There are, a lot. I'm sure it's just many of you, lots of great memories of being with classmates, sporting events, staying up too late. Specifically, the two things that I think were really kind of big aha moments and trajectory kind of pivots for me was when I was a freshman, I took a class with Dr. Gino Barr, who created the Women's Studies department at Duke, and I later majored in Women's Studies. And being in a class with her was the first time that I realized that I could be allowed to be difficult as a woman as long as I did it from a position of power. And that was like a real aha moment for someone to be really polite and kind of a perfectionist. And I was like, oh, if I achieve enough power in whatever I do, then I don't have to be difficult to be rude, but I can be. And people will still listen and still be polite back to me. So that was great. Uh, when I was at Fuqua and I was a first year, I did an early recruiting event with Procter Gamble, and that's where I ended up interning and where I ended up going full time. And I got an invitation to go onto a yacht that Procter and Gamble had on Lake Michigan. This was an event in Chicago. These were the days. It's not like this anymore, everyone. But as soon as I stepped onto that yacht, someone came up to me and I'd never met him before and took my arm and he said, "Hi, Laura. I understand you go to Fuqua." He said, "I went to Fuqua too, and I'm going to help you." And he took me around that room and he would make sure that I met the right people at Procter and Gamble. And he'd kind of murmur in my ear, Devil Wears Prada style, like, "This is so and so, the general manager of this." And he made sure I was so well set up with people in that room. And he didn't know me, and our only connection was Duke. And that was really kind of my first foray into discovering the power of the alumni network. But it was because of him, Ricardo Sanchez, that he, really made sure that I understood that. And I really appreciated it.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's could not be a more natural segue into what I was going to ask you next, which is what role has the Duke Alumni Network played in your career journey? Obviously, that was a critical moment in time where you really felt the power and the impact of it. But any other anecdotes you can share with us?
Yes. Some of you may have heard this before, so apologies if this is a repeat, but almost all of the jobs I've had post undergrad, and which was just one, I went to a startup for 4 years, founded by a Duke alum, and worked across a portfolio of companies that he and some of his friends had. But post MBA as well, I was almost always hired by a Duke alum, or a Duke alum was the CEO or the president of whatever company I was at, or I knew a Duke alum at that company who gave my resume to the hiring manager. And one example I'll give is when I was moving from Procter Gamble to Mars Incorporated. I saw a great posting. It was for a role that I was like 60% qualified for on paper, but I'd read Lean In and the fact that,
Right.
oftentimes we opt ourselves out without even applying. And so I
Mhm.
thought, I know I can probably do this role and I'm not 100% qualified, but I'm definitely not going to get it if I don't apply. So I applied for it. And later, the marketing director who hired me told me that she was sitting there kind of with my resume, and the general manager walked by of the business unit, and he said, "Oh, what do you have there?" And she's like, "Oh, resume. She doesn't like totally fit the role, but she seems really smart. She went to Duke." And he said, "Oh, I went to Duke. You should hire her." And he walked away. And so I don't know if that's why I
Wow.
got the job. I probably why I got invited in for a final interview and then I got the job. But those are the types of things that it's whether or not you like it. I mean, it's great if you're a Blue Devil. It's kind of an unconscious bias as part of the
Mhm.
community that you must be smart, you must be hardworking, you must be enthusiastic, and it generally proves kind of true. I will share one other anecdote. When I was
Please.
interviewing at a large public company to be a senior brand manager, I did get this offer. I did not take it. Um, the hiring manager only talked to me about Duke basketball in my interview. That was it. I don't think he told HR he did that. I did have to interview with other people at that company as well. So that was not only it, but that was my 90-minute interview with him.
Mm.
And I declined that offer. But it was a great company. I just didn't want to relocate. But the network has really helped me out. And if nothing else, it's given me a shorthand with a lot of different hiring managers and executives of just kind of the commonality we share as Blue Devils.
Fantastic. No, I think everyone on this Zoom can probably speak to a moment where they felt that same, feeling of being part of this fantastic, really powerful network as I mentioned earlier. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure many people tuned in because they wanted to get a better understanding of your career path. Can you walk us through the key roles and highlights that led to your current role?
Yes. So I actually get this question a lot because I have career changed a lot in terms of different industries. So when I graduated from undergrad, I went to a startup for 4 years, went back to school at Duke, got my MBA, and moved into consumer goods brand management. I did that at Procter Gamble, where I interned and then moved over to Mars Incorporated. I
Mhm.
was in a situation that so many marketers are in sometimes where they're in sort of a very unique discipline or industry, and there's not a lot of that actually in the market they're in. So I wanted to continue to move up in my career, but in brand management in DC at the time, Amazon wasn't there, Nestle wasn't there, there weren't a lot
Mhm.
of other companies, and even Procter and Gamble and Mars, the offices I'd been in were satellite offices. They were much smaller and they
Right.
weren't headquarters. So I knew I needed to career change into a different industry. And hospitality is really big in DC. But hospitality is can oftentimes be hard to break into at a mid-level senior type of role if you don't already have hospitality experience. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg. I did work the Duke network very hard on that one at Marriott, Hilton, and Choice to be able to
Yeah.
leverage a role. But I'll be honest, I applied for a lot of roles. I think I applied for like 9 roles at Marriott before
Mhm.
I got one that stuck as a marketing director on the Ritz-Carlton brand, but which was a great role. Didn't suck, neither did the brand. But it took a lot of tenacity. And what I really had to focus on to make that switch were the transferable skills. And I'll tell you
Okay.
a secret, which is that I had to learn the hard way. Brand management in hospitality is a different function than brand management in consumer packaged goods. And so a
Mm.
lot of seasoned brand managers from consumer packaged goods will reach out and say, "Hey, I see this big hotel company. There's a brand manager job or brand management job." They are not the same function. And so when I switched over industries, I had to kind of switch my function too. So I went
Right.
into brand marketing, and that's a little further on the creative, a little less on the product.
Mhm.
And that's because that was a skill set that was more transferable. Brand management no longer was. I did that, pivoted again in the pandemic. I chose at that moment to go to a private equity owned company. It was specifically, I had an offer to a private equity owned company where I'd be working on 7 brands as their vice
Okay.
president of marketing. And then I also had an offer to go to a large public company and be their global head of marketing for a large, well known brand. And to be honest, the latter one, the large public company, global head of marketing, that sounded like the sweet spot of what I'd been doing. The work sounded more interesting, but I chose kind of the route that in many ways kind of intrigued me less because I'd never worked at a private equity owned company and I'd
Mhm.
never managed more than one brand at once. And when I thought about what I wanted to do in the future, I knew I was going to need PE experience and to know what that was like to interface with a board like that. And I knew that I was going to need to have like full brand portfolio experience. So I took that and then later pivoted back into hospitality with Choice Hotels, moved though from brand marketing into the really heavy side, the data side, paid
Right.
media and search engine optimization and digital marketing. So another pivot, but that was my last private sector marketing role, and I really enjoyed that and being able to marry the marketing outcomes to business outcomes. That was very rewarding for me. But in this current role, I've been in higher education now for 18 months. That was a complete industry change I didn't necessarily plan out, but
Hmm.
I've always been a big fan of putting myself up for opportunities if they were interesting and seeing where they went. And as a longtime Duke volunteer, I could not resist but applying for this role when it opened up to a public executive search. And again, it was a career change in terms of industry. And I think
Right.
my key in getting the role was not trying to pretend that I had any experience in higher ed because I certainly
Mm.
didn't, but focusing on the transferable skill sets and then leaning in on what I did know, which was the volunteer experience. And I certainly was credentialed in that.
Wow, what a journey. And we're very lucky to have you at Duke now. And I think a natural segue from that, Laura, is you really spotlighting your focus on being a Duke volunteer as an alum. Now, in your current role, with those 18 months under your belt and so much more to come, how do you integrate the power of Duke volunteers into the university's broader strategic initiatives?
Well, when I think about what the Duke Network, the 205,000 alumni across the world, even some of which may be multiple degree holders from our schools,
Hmm.
have to give, it's really their time, talent, and treasure. And those things ebb and flow, including how people want to give them, how they can give them, and where they want to give them. And the one thing that, based on the data that I've seen in current year, in this most recent year, and historically, where Duke alums under index is in fact volunteerism at and through the university. Definitely not in their local communities, definitely not in things like that. And I think for me, really understanding how we can unlock the power of the brains behind our Duke alums, the desire to give back, and their
Hmm.
genuine desire to make the university better is really key because, as President Price has said, alumni are one of the key pillars of the university. And certainly, as we're now in a public campaign, they are one of the key pillars of that as well. So, the more of you that want to raise your hand and get involved, I started as a volunteer in 2006 when I graduated from Duke. And even without this role, it's been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. So, I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at future events.
I love it. Well, there are roughly 100 folks on this call. So think about how much we can do with 100 people volunteering actively in their region or for Duke as a whole. Really, a lot can be accomplished. Off of that, Laura, what has been the most rewarding strategic initiative or project you've recently launched in your role that has successfully built community or increased commitment in some way?
For me, and this was a charge I was given, I cannot say that I invented this charge at all because I did not. It was when I first joined Duke about 18 months ago, and I knew that we were in a campaign, a silent
Hmm.
phase of one, just for my volunteer work. And when I joined, everyone told me this was going to be Duke's first campaign, and really the first amongst our peer schools too, that was going to have non-philanthropic engagement goals. So
Right.
while we were all going to fundraise and make sure that everyone understood the priorities around fundraising for really important wicked problems that we need to solve for Duke and the world, that there were going to be ways that people could engage and we were going to count that. And I was like, great,
Hmm.
what are those engagement goals? And they're like, that is what you get to figure out. And so it was a really great, fun, interesting first challenge to have, knowing that
Hmm.
these goals are going to live for the life of the campaign through the end of fiscal year 29 and then beyond as Duke's first engagement goals. And so
Hmm.
the way that I like to problem solve and goal set is always solving the business problem first. And the business problem with campaigns and with not-for-profits and just even in Duke's engagement is that we have a pipeline issue. We need to get more alumni
Hmm.
into the fold, engaging with Duke, coming to events, volunteering, keeping up with what Duke is doing via digital communications, and making a gift of any size. And so that's why the first goal is around newly engaged alumni and bringing in 85,000 newly engaged alumni through this campaign. And then making sure that we have more alums who do all four of the things I just named. Those are highly engaged alumni if they do all four, because we know that if we get alums to do all four of those things in a year, we unlock something special in them. And Bates, you're one of them. I'm one of them. It's an amazing list of 3,000 people, 110 of whom I'm sure are on this call right now.
Exactly.
So it's been really rewarding to set those. And regardless of how long, I stay at Duke, hopefully for a while, hopefully until my kids graduate, maybe not from Duke, but from somewhere, not jail, hopefully, then, these goals will outlive that. And importantly, also, it will get more of us involved and everyone can understand that this campaign is for everyone.
Fantastic. Well, a lot more to come with the campaign, including, if you're in the New York region where I am, a campaign event in April. So stay tuned for more news on that. All right, one last question here for you, Laura, before we move to audience Q&A, which will be those pre-submitted questions and also questions submitted in our chat. What advice would you give to Duke students and alums who want to build a career in brand, marketing, and/or higher ed?
All right. A broad set of industries there. I think, and I don't mean to belabor this point just because of my job. Remember, I've only had this job for 18 months, so I was singing these praises before. I think regardless of what you want to do, it's really important that you build a really authentic network while you're at Duke. And if you've already graduated, with people in your community. You don't know when you reach out to someone if they're going to end up maybe becoming your mentor and it's a long-term relationship. I ran into my mentor the other day at a middle school concert because we both have middle
Wow.
schoolers, and I hadn't seen her in a while, but now we're getting coffee next week. But she mentored me for like a decade. She lives in Durham and she's a
Wow.
Duke alum. You also don't know if it's going to be a one-time interaction. And maybe you're like, well, that was kind of a waste, but it isn't, because now you're connected with them. You connect with them on LinkedIn. And then the next time you see a job at their company or their higher ed institution post, you can say, hey, Bates, thanks again for telling me, what it would take to make it, in this field. I saw a role on your team or like in your department. What do you think? Like, am I the right level? Would you be willing to send out a resume? The more connections you make that are authentic, and the more relationships you build, the fewer you'll have to do when that job is actually out there. It looks real transactional if suddenly you are just like reaching out to all these people and you're like, how about this job? How
Yes.
about that job? It feels totally different if they feel like they know you and that you were willing to talk to them when they had nothing to offer you.
So actively cultivating that network and building those relationships. Fantastic. Well, thank you to all of you who submitted questions ahead of time. We got many and they were all valuable and interesting, but we've pre-selected a couple just to kind of think about what might be valuable for the whole group. One that's particularly interesting and exciting, which Laura, I'd love to ask you, is, in your role, you drive engagement across this awesome group of alumni. What are some other brands you feel have done an admirable job of driving and maintaining engagement with their respective audiences?
Well, I don't remember if any of my, I didn't look at who actually joined the call. I don't remember if any of my Marriott friends are joining this, Marriott Fuqua friends, but I'm a little biased having worked on the brand. I think Ritz-Carlton does a really great job of engaging, retaining, their respective audiences. And again, I worked on the brand, so grain of salt, but I have, in my personal life, stayed at many other nice luxury hotel brands. And the difference with Ritz-Carlton and what they do is they try to anticipate your need. So, certainly while they have fine dining and all the things that like a Four Seasons or a St. Regis would have, they try to anticipate your needs more. So like if you're coughing, they're not going to wait for you to like ask for a cup of tea. They'll say like, oh, Miss Heilenday, do you want a cup of tea? If they've, I've been waiting in lines before where the check-in line is really long and they see my kids fidgeting, and rather than just trying to hurry the line along, which they should also do, they also will come out of line. They will talk to my kids, give them
Wow.
commands. They'll learn their names. And, and this is true in alumni engagement, but in everything you do, if you can make people feel like as your customers that they're valuable to you and they're not just a transaction or an asset, then people want to believe in you and they want to believe in your there are lots of guests who don't book a vacation around a destination. They'll just go to ritzcarlton.com and they'll pick their destination based on where there are Ritz-Carltons. And so, again, fun, easy brand to work on. But really what made the difference was not that it was beautiful hotels, because there are lots of those. It was that they really tried to make you feel special and welcome.
I think Duke has a way of doing that too. So
Yeah.
see a lot of similarities there. That's awesome. A little bit of a pivot into more of the career focused types of questions, Laura. What suggestions would you give to alums specifically in this, relatively tough market who want to pivot again after their first job to an MBA as you did?
Yeah, I think it's not a I mean, we'll see where the market goes. It's not a terrible time. I actually entered business school around a time that I think it was very tough for the two classes above me when they graduated, but the
Hmm.
market kind of rebounded by the time I graduated. And part of that was just luck. So based on how the market is now, this may not be a terrible time. Um, Kind of key tactical advice, take the GMAT and see if you can get a really high score and see where you get into school. Because if you are also looking at taking on a lot of debt, and
Hmm.
maybe the school doesn't have like the career outcomes you might want, that is kind of a gamble for you to buy a little more time and make that career pivot. So I think part of it is really, what are your options and what do you want to do post MBA? Do you have to get your MBA to get it, or can you do other things that maybe don't take you out of the job market and that are not as expensive, in order to make that pivot? But if you do want to make the pivot, if you feel like you've gotten into a great business school, it's a good val prop for you, like you can afford it, or they've given you merit money, or someone else is paying for it, and what you want to do is only something you can really do post MBA, or that's the fastest route. Getting an MBA, at least for me, was a great way to pivot into brand management. It made it seamless.
Mm.
And that was definitely the shortest, fastest, easiest route for me. But I did take on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So it was not, and I could not, which I paid off, but I could not, like I didn't want to quit a job until I was done with that. So there were additional handcuffs that come with it. But you want to weigh all that out. It is a fast way to pivot though.
No, I think that's a great, well-rounded answer in terms of all the considerations one has. Similar to the question about first job to MBA, and I know you touched on this earlier, but someone asked, what challenges did you face transitioning from corporate to higher ed? Can you add a little bit more background or flavor to what that transition was like and how higher ed is different from corporate?
Yes. I mean, I would say, and everyone like warned me about this when I was leaving, and everyone warned me about this when I was coming. So I did feel like I was amply warned. The data, and especially coming from like a very data heavy background most recently,
Mm.
um, the data in higher ed, and this is not just a Duke thing, this is probably like a higher ed and a not-for-profit thing, maybe even. The data in terms of what's available, uh, how things automate, systems use, platform integration. It's like maybe like 20 years ago in corporate. So
Mm.
that was, a challenge and a shift. But I try very much not to stress about the stuff I can't control. I just want to know what the level is. And I mean, the thing is, I could lament that, but I knew that. Everyone told me that going in. Everyone told me that when I
Right.
was interviewing. And so it's like, okay, what data is here? What can we use? What data sets are available? How do we get a little more of this to automate? As opposed to like really obstinately being like, this is crazy. Like we need to do a revolution. It's much easier to do an evolution and sort of figure out what you've got and try to make the best of it as you kind of evolve on that path and you try to do other things. I think one interesting transition into higher ed, and this is a very Duke specific thing, is
Hmm.
this is the only time I've taken a job that I knew all of my direct reports when I joined in advance. And that was from being a Duke volunteer. And that's different because usually in
Right.
corporate you come in and you're like surprised and everyone's like, and maybe you met like one or two of them during the interview. So I don't know. I don't know if any of my direct reports are on this call, but maybe it's worse that
Maybe a
you're
few.
coming in. Yes.
I love it. No, exactly. And it's such a privilege and fun for them to see your evolution as well. I want to pull on a question from the chat. We have Anne asking regarding MBA decisions, are certificates valued, especially for us later career folks where a degree might not make sense financially?
I think it really depends on the company and the hiring manager. If you're pretty senior in your career, doing advanced analytics or brand management or finance, you probably don't
Hmm.
need the MBA to like pivot or like prove your career chops. So for me, when I was a hiring manager, N equals one, I thought a certificate was valuable if someone had it, if it was a way of them demonstrating that they had competency in something that I
Mm.
wouldn't assume they'd have it. So if they were like a poetry major and they'd been a poet for 20 years, them having like certificates in really like hard analytical things would then let me know that they in fact probably had those chops and they'd receive some sort of formal training than if they just tried to articulate it without the certificate.
Okay, so it substantiates what you see of someone's resume maybe, and it adds another layer.
It adds another layer if your resume is already not going to speak to it, but I wouldn't
Okay,
do it if it's just kind of an advancement of what you've already done for 10 or 15 years that you probably can already speak and demonstrate enough expertise in.
okay, fabulous. And hope that helps. One more question, Laura, because we need to be mindful of everyone's time tonight. Um, a little bit of not a heavy hitter, but one that is on a lot of folks' minds. It was submitted in the audience questions. Can you speak more about managing work-life balance as a working mother in such a senior role? I've met one of your kids. They're very cute. Tell us more about that experience.
Yeah, I mean that's been one of the big challenges of my career. And there are, I'll be really clear with all the parents or potential parents someday or even current parents. There is no magic formula. Like you have to do what works for you. And for me, it's just I have to be able to live with my decisions.
Mm,
I'm okay with not being there for every single school activity for my kids. I have a kindergartner and a fifth grader. But if I wasn't okay with that and I couldn't live with that or sleep with that, then I would have had to make different career decisions and I'd have to take a break or lean out.
right.
But I am okay with that. Like it is what it is. I was just telling someone the other day, they're like, oh, you're going to go to kindergarten graduation. I'm like, that's not a thing. And then I was like, wait, that's great if you think that's a thing. But like, hopefully they graduate kindergarten. It's more of a problem for me if he doesn't. But there's lots of practical things. Like I do tell my kids, I say once a semester, pick out the one thing you want me at. And then I try really hard to be at that thing. And that's the thing they wanted
Mm,
me at. And then I'm there and I get my fifth grader makes eye contact and then looks away, but he knows I was there. And then that's been really valuable. And I think as well, sticking to the boundaries around work-life balance, like I try to get home at a certain time. It doesn't mean that I have to log back on at night. And it doesn't mean that I always do, but sometimes I do. But then I'm still there for the time that I kind of committed to my family mentally and
mm,
physically. But I'll also bring them to work events. And even when I was a volunteer, I'd bring them to Duke events. I just think there is, oh, also, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, like having lots of discretionary income and
mhm.
what you can do with that with childcare works. My husband's a double dookie. He was a corporate lawyer for a long time at a firm. Now he's a general counsel. He's, a partner in this, so he is helpful, but like
Of
his
course.
career has made him even less available than mine has.
Mm,
So, I negotiated having my parents move by us, and now my mom moved down here, and lives in a townhome near us. I always have a gaggle of babysitters that I use. I try to do as much advanced planning as possible so that when I'm there for my kids, I can be there. But, when I'm dialed into work, I'm dialed in. And I'll be honest with you, Bates, and everyone. I got feedback early on in my career when I was a young brand manager that I was making the other working moms look bad because I wasn't turning down trips and was like doing too much.
mm,
Now, they didn't see, I'm sure, what I was giving up to do that for. And also and I
mm.
was like, huh, because I mean, I'm very again, no judgment. I want all people to succeed. And I
Of
understand that like
course.
based on the childcare system and everything else,
Mhm.
it's very difficult if you are in a heterosexual couple and you're the woman with
Mm.
children. But yeah, I didn't really know what to do with that feedback, and I still don't know what to do with it other than I make the choices that I'm happy to live with, and I think everyone else has to do the same.
Fantastic. No, thank you for sharing that as
I
a
do wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, so I'm not gonna lie, like that's how a lot of stuff gets done. That may not be for you, but that is when I do stuff.
coffee is a friend,
Yeah.
definitely. One quick extra question for you, Laura, because we can't get enough of the conversation. Is there any parting advice or a final word you'd like to share with our Duke community tonight?
Whether you were a student, a recent grad, or an alum of my vintage, perhaps a little more seasoned, um, I think, and again, I do not say this from my role. I say this from a place of being an alum and a former student. The Duke Network has been instrumental in my career, not just hiring me or coaching me through former bosses, but also just in friendship, in benchmarking salaries, in
Right.
introductions to people, in just having supportive friends. leverage that network, get to know people, log into the Duke Alumni Network. And you're like, what is that? Okay, it's a pinned post on my LinkedIn. It's a secured part of the Duke Alumni website. Update
Right.
your information, look for people there, and try to do that. And it's tough. Aging parents, demanding jobs, little kids, pets. I get it, but it is worth the investment. If nothing else, I think it will help your careers, but if nothing else, you will get friendship, and that is invaluable.
Well, I think that's an inspiring note to wrap up on here tonight, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your valuable perspective with us. And thank you equally to everyone for attending today's Duke Career Conversation. I ask you to please save the date for our next Duke Career Conversation on Wednesday, January 21st from 5:30 to 6, same time as this. I love all these hearts. It's quite distracting, but amazing. Featuring our Duke Board of Trustee member, Garheng Kong, who is the founder and managing partner of HealthQuest Capital. So look out for registration next month, and we look forward to seeing you virtually in the new year, if not sooner. Thank you again, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everyone.